All right, so we are going to finish up talking about contract law on page 66 here. And if you'll remember from the last class, there are three basic elements of a contract: offer, acceptance, consideration. And again, you must have all three of these elements together. They must line up with each other, kind of like a negligence, where you have to have all four of the elements of negligence. So let's take a look at each of these elements in a little bit more detail. So let's move over to page 71. All right. So the first element is the term offer. Now, when I use this term offer, it has a very significant meaning. And what I mean by that is, an offer is a statement that you make in some way. Maybe it's verbal, maybe it's in writing, maybe it's an email to somebody or a text message or whatever. In other words, it's some statement that is made. And the significance of that statement is an offer, if the statement rises to the level of being, quote unquote, an offer, then the person to whom the offer is made can accept the offer. That's the first two elements of contract law: offer and acceptance. And the reason that's important is because when there has been an offer that has been accepted, a contract is formed at that moment. That would be a form of a bilateral contract. And so the idea is, when a court is analyzing whether or not there's a contract, we're going to go through these three elements. The judge is going to review that during the trial. And the first element would be an offer. And so one of the first questions that has to be answered is whether or not there truly was an offer that was made. Is the statement that was made by the person the offeror? Is that statement of significance enough to become, quote unquote, an offer for contract law purposes? Or was that statement some other kind of statement that is not an offer, and therefore the first element of a contract is not satisfied? So let's take a look at the basic idea of what we mean by an offer. So first of all, right here, letter A, when I make a statement, it must be my intent. In other words, it must be my purpose, my goal, that when I make that statement, that I want to enter into a contract. That is the reason why I have made the statement through whatever means of communication we're talking about. It has to be what we call, or I must have the present intent to contract. That is, it must be my purpose, my goal, whatever you want to call it, when I make the statement that I do want to enter into a contract. In other words, I'm not making the statement for some other reason. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. My present intent to enter into a contract. So let's say we're going to go fishing, and I'm going to take you out of my boat. We're going to go salmon fishing. Hopefully we'll catch a salmon. So I tell you, all right, meet me at the boat ramp. So let's say that's my boat. It's not really, but maybe someday. So I tell you, I'll meet you at the boat ramp, and I'm going to trailer the boat down there with my truck. And when I get to the boat ramp, I'm going to back up and I'm going to back the boat down to the water. And when I get down close to the water, I'm going to get out of my truck, I'm going to hop up into the boat while it's still on the trailer, and then I'm going to have you back me the rest of the way down into the water, and then I'll drive the boat off the trailer, and then you're going to go park the truck and the trailer up in the parking lot, come back down, jump in the boat, we're going to go fishing. Great. So let's say I get in there, I get in the trailer, you back me down to the water, and I go to start the motor. And it won't start. Won't start. So I start getting all mad. And there's people waiting to get in there with their boats too. If you've ever been to a boat ramp during salmon season, there's always tons of people. And they're not always the nicest, especially early in the morning. They want to get out there. And so they start screaming at me, "Hey idiot, get out of the boat ramp, what are you doing?" You know, all these different pleasantries. They're yelling at me. So I'm getting all flustered and I'm, "Oh, this stupid boat," and eventually the battery dies. And now it's just sitting there floating around. So we got to put it back on the trailer. I'm just like, "This stupid boat, it's yours for $100. Sick of it." Okay? You're like, "Ooh, okay, $100. So you can't really tell her, but this boat has 3 motors. Each of those motors is about 200 horsepower. Each of those motors is about $15,000. So that's what, $45,000 just in motors. That boat holds about another 60. Then the electronics, that's a $180,000, $200,000 boat right there. So you're like, $100, I accept your offer. And you pull out a $100 bill and you give it to me. I'm like, "What are you talking about? You said this boat's yours for $100. I just gave you $100. I accepted your offer. We have consideration, money for a boat. In exchange, we have a contract." And I'm like, no way. Get out of here. So you sue me, right? So now we're going to go to court. So we get to court. Again, burden of proof's on you because you're the one claiming there's a contract. So you have to prove that I made an offer. So this is what the judge is going to look at. Was it my intent when I made that statement? Was it my purpose? Did I want to enter into a contract, or did I have some other purpose or reason for making that statement? Now clearly, I was frustrated, I was angry, and the facts show that I was essentially making that statement out of frustration because my boat wouldn't start. I was not wanting to sell my boat. I was just expressing how mad I was at the boat. Clearly, I'm not going to sell a $200,000 boat for $100. So the facts don't support this idea that I had the intent to enter into a contract. I had some other intent. So no offer was made, therefore there was nothing for you to accept, therefore no contract. Excuse me. All right. So you lost on that one. So that's the first thing you have to look at. Is there an intent to enter into a contract? Or was the statement being made for some other purpose? Now in the real world, you don't get that kind of an example necessarily, but we see this in the real world quite often in pre-contract negotiations. So maybe you're selling your house, and I come to the house during an open house, and I talk with you about, how much do you want? Well, are you willing to go down a little bit? And all of that, and we're doing pre-contract negotiations. And so we're not really making statements necessarily that might lead to a contract, yes, but at that moment we're not really firming it up. Or another place you see this is in the sports world in letters of intent. It's your intent to do something, but it's not necessarily being made as a binding offer at that moment. So we do see this same idea in the real world, especially when I see it quite a bit in business law, where somebody's interested in maybe buying a business and they want to do due diligence before they make an offer. And so they're going to want to look at your books and your tax returns and your payroll records and all of that to determine, maybe get an appraisal done of the property, to determine if they even want to make an offer. And so normally the way that we would begin those negotiations is we'd enter into what's called a non-disclosure agreement, where we both agree that we'll provide each other information. We won't disclose that information, and if the deal falls through, we'll give it back. So it does happen in the real world. Excuse me. Still got that tickled. All right. So along the same idea, with this idea of intent, first, it has to be the intent of the person making the offer to enter into a contract. But part two to that is, both sides have to have the same intent. Both of us have to be thinking the same thing. And we call this the meeting of the minds rule. This is the first M rule in contract law. There are 3 rules that begin with the letter M. And this is the first one. And this is the idea that a contract is based upon the idea of an agreement. And in order to have an agreement, both sides must have the same intent. If you don't have the same intent, you don't have an agreement. So if we're thinking 2 different things, we don't have an agreement. We don't have a meeting of the minds. So let me illustrate. So again, let's say we're going fishing. This time my boat starts. We're out in the boat, got in the water, we're trolling around, trying to catch a salmon, having a good time. And we're talking, and while we're talking, hold on for a minute, I gotta get my props out. While we're talking, I say to you, you know, I'm thinking about selling my vintage car. And you're like, oh, okay, well, how much do you want? I'm like, well, I'm thinking, you know, I'm going to need, I don't know, $40,000 in cash for the car. I might let it go for $25,000 because I need the money. And you're like, oh, I might be interested in that, right? And you keep thinking about it. Sure, I'll buy that car for $25,000. I'll buy your vintage car. So you happen to have $25,000 on you, and you pull it out and give it to me, and I give you the key. There you go. And you then hook the fish, and you reel it in, and you now have a keeper salmon. I'm like, okay, hey, look, why don't you come back to my house when we get done fishing here? I'll fillet the salmon out for you. We'll cook some of it on my Traeger, and I'll vacuum pack the rest so you can take it home in your car you just bought. You're like, great. So you get back to my house, we have a nice meal, and you get ready to leave. So you start walking to the car with the key. I'm like, what are you doing? Get away from that car. You're like, wait, no, I bought it. No. When I said vintage automobile, I was talking about my 1974 Pacer. That's out in my field. It's vintage. You guys ever seen one of those before? They don't make them anymore. The company's out of business, but 1974 AMC Pacer. In my opinion, probably the ugliest car ever made. It looked like a Pac-Man. I don't know if you guys ever seen one in the real world. All right, here's a movie trivia thing. Who drove a powder blue AMC Pacer with a flame on the side? It's an old, well, not old. You guys probably think it's old. Anyone? From the 80s? Wayne's World. Ever seen that movie? Okay, here's your homework. You gotta watch Wayne's World. It's a dumb, stupid comedy. I love dumb, stupid comedies. Dumb and Dumber is probably my favorites in the whole world. Anyway, so you're like, wait, I didn't buy that. I bought your 1957 Corvette Stingray in pristine condition. You know what those go for nowadays? I mean, low miles, original, all like that. A couple $100,000. So we have a problem again, right? So now you sue me again. And again, we're back to offer acceptance consideration. So first issue, did I, when I made the statement, I will sell you my vintage car, did I have the intent to enter into a contract? And the answer is yes, I did. It's different than the other example, the stupid boat I'll sell you for $100. In that case, I did not have the intent. But in this one, I did. I wanted to sell my Pacer. And you're thinking, I'm going to sell my Corvette. So the problem is, even though I had the intent to enter into the contract, we did not have the same intent. We did not have what's called a meeting of the minds. And this is the idea that both sides must have the same intent, the same idea, or you do not have a contract. So that's the meeting of the minds rule. It's the only graphic I could find on Google Images to illustrate meeting of the minds, right? It's kind of interesting though, two brains shaking hands, but you get the idea. So that's what you got to look at as well. Did both parties have the same intent? If not, you do not have a contract. So in that case, a situation would be a judge would rule, well, obviously you did not have a meeting of the minds. Hasbrook's not going to sell that Corvette for $40,000. It's when it's worth $200,000 or more. You're not going to buy this old beat up Pacer for 40 grand when it's maybe worth $500. So we don't have the same intent, therefore no contract. So that's the first M rule of contract law, the meeting of the minds rule. All right, so that's the first threshold. Number one, was the statement an offer to begin with? Was it made with the intent to enter into a contract? And number two, are both parties thinking the same thing? Now, in addition, in order for a statement to rise to the level of being an offer, there has to be enough defined terms or specificity, however you want to call it, in the statement itself. So essentially, you know what the basic deal is. So that would be price, quantity, quality, time frame. If it's a service contract, the scope of the services. If it's a motor vehicle, the year, the make, the model of the car, perhaps the vehicle identification number, the VIN number here. What are the shipping terms and all that. So that's the other problem with I will sell you my vintage car. It's not specific enough. So really my statement really isn't an offer. Now it might be different if we're talking, I'm standing right next to my car with my hand on the car, and I say, I'll sell you this vintage car for $40,000. Now you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about my Pacer, I'm talking about this vehicle. So again, the facts are critical in analyzing, in the case of a lawsuit, whether or not there's a contract. All right, obviously the next element, you have to communicate the offer to the offeree, that is the person that's receiving the offer. And that leads us to the next rule. And this is the advertisement rule that I want you to know. So for example, let's take a look at this here. All right, Safeway. This is an old ad. I can tell by the price. So this is an advertisement by Safeway. Rancher's Reserve boneless beef loin New York strip. It's a New York steak, $4.99 a pound. Nowadays it's like $15.99 a pound. So, is that an offer? Well, it kind of looks like it, doesn't it? Does Safeway have the intent to sell meat and other groceries, obviously? So do they have the intent to enter into a contract when they make this advertisement? Yeah, they want to sell produce and meat and other types of groceries. So they do have the intent to enter into a contract. So it would appear that an advertisement such as this is an offer. So let's just think that through, because that can lead to a problem. If an advertisement is an offer, when I then show up at Safeway to accept, I basically show up to buy the meat, I'm accepting the offer, right? Creating a contract. So let's say I show up to Safeway and I say to them, when I get there, I saw your advertisement for $4.99 a pound for New York strip roast. I accept your offer, load up my truck, it's around back. Here's my truck. Right? So that's a 53-foot long refrigerated semi-truck trailer. Do you know how many pounds of freight that will hold legally without an overweight permit? 40,000 pounds. Overall vehicle weight, 80,000 pounds. So 40,000 pounds of cargo. So I'm like, I saw your ad for New York steak for $4.99 a pound, I accept your offer. Give me 40,000 pounds of steak. Throw it in my truck, and I'll write you a check. And then I'm going to drive it down to California and park out there in the Walmart parking lot and sell it out of the back of my truck for $12.99 a pound. Make, pretty good money on the side. 40,000 pounds times $6 a pound profit, that's pretty good money. So here's the problem, right? If this is an advertisement, when I show up and I say I accept, Safeway's now stuck. Now what if 10 people do that? And they obviously don't have that much meat. So now they're in breach of contract every time someone shows up in response to the advertisement. So to avoid this problem, essentially the law says that normally an advertisement would look like an offer, has the intent and all of that. We have a meeting of the minds. But to avoid this problem of being instantly in breach of contract when somebody responds to your advertisement, the rule is an advertisement is not considered an offer most of the time. Instead, it is considered an invitation to the public, for the public to respond, and then for whoever responds, then they make the offer. So when I show up at Safeway with my semi-truck, I'm actually the one making the offer at that point. Yes, I've responded to the advertisement, but the advertisement itself is not an offer. Therefore, when I say I'll buy 40,000 pounds, I'm actually the one making the offer. And then Safeway could accept it if they had that much beef and they wanted to sell it at that price. So that's the rule I want you to know about an advertisement. That way if you put an ad out on Craigslist, you're selling your bike or your canoe or something, and you get 15 people that email you or text you back, you don't have 15 different contracts. You made an advertisement which is a public invitation, and when they're responding back, they're the ones actually making the offer. And then you can finalize the transaction after that. Excuse me. Rewards. Talked about rewards already, but a reward is treated as a unilateral offer. That means if I say in my advertisement, I will pay $500 to whoever returns my bicycle, when somebody responds by doing what I have asked for in my advertisement, they are now accepting my offer. So that's a little bit twist on that rule for a reward. But typically speaking, an advertisement is not going to be considered an offer because of the problem with multiple responses creating multiple contracts. Now, in the real world, when you make an offer, you should specify, one, the time frame for the offer to be accepted, and then two, how the acceptance must occur. Because that can also lead to problems. So that brings us to the next page. The next element is acceptance. So again, offer acceptance. So this is the next thing a judge is going to look at. Was the offer actually accepted or not? Or are there some issues in how the acceptance was communicated that make it not actually an acceptance? And remember why this is important. If I make an offer and you accept it, a contract is formed at the moment you accept. And therefore I am bound by the terms of the contract. So this brings up a couple of issues. Number one, when you make an acceptance, you communicate it back to me, obviously. It must be your intent when you do the communication that you want to accept as opposed to some other intent. Like for example, if you email me back saying, I'm really interested in your Corvette, will you take payments? You're not accepting at that point. You're asking about terms and conditions that might apply. So it has to be a very clear acceptance. And this brings us to the next rule that starts with M. This is the mirror image rule. So let me explain. The mirror image rule is basically the idea that in order for an acceptance to be a valid acceptance, thereby creating a contract, the acceptance must be a duplicate, a mirror image of the offer, right? In other words, there's no part of the acceptance that has the effect of changing or modifying the terms of the offer. So they must be a mirror image of each other. So let's say, for example, I send you an email, and I say in my email, I will sell you my 1957 Corvette Stingray convertible, 25,000 original miles, original paint, for $50,000 in cash, payable this coming Friday, and I will meet you at 12 noon at the Bi-Mart in Monmouth. So you email me back, I accept your offer, I will bring $50,000 in cash for your 1957 Corvette, vehicle identification number XYZ245, whatever, and I will meet you at Bi-Mart at 4 p.m. on Friday. So did you accept under the mirror image rule? Has to be an exact duplicate. 50,000? Yes, we match on that. This coming Friday? Yes. Bi-Mart parking lot? Yes. The car is the same car we're both talking about, but there's a problem. I said noon, you said 4 o'clock. So we don't have a mirror image of each other. You altered the offer with your acceptance. And so you did not truly accept. Now the reason why that's important is, in that case, let's say, I wanted to meet at noon because I needed the cash because I'm going to go catch a flight down to Las Vegas that afternoon. Now I'm going to go buy another vintage collector car with the money you just gave me and come back home and turn around and flip it again. I actually have a client that flips vintage cars. What he does. Makes pretty good money too. He's a lot more mechanical than I am. Yeah, you don't want me working on your car. So the idea is this. When we talk about the mirror image rule, the acceptance must be a mirror image without changing the terms of the offer. If it changes the terms, it's not truly an acceptance. Instead, it is a counteroffer. A counteroffer. So when you say 4 o'clock and I said noon, now I can accept your counteroffer or I can decline it. Now that's also important, as we'll get to more in a minute, because a counteroffer has the effect of terminating the original offer. So we'll come back to that in a moment. So pretty simple rule, the mirror image rule. That's the idea that when you accept an offer, it must be exactly on the terms of the offer itself. If you deviate, then you are, in essence, rejecting the offer and making a counteroffer. At which point the other person can accept or reject depending on the terms. That's the second M rule, the mirror image. So first M rule is the meeting of the minds. Second M rule is the mirror image rule. All right. Next we have the third M rule. It's on page 73. This is the mailbox rule. All these cool little rules. Just so you know, these little catchphrase rules, they actually came from court cases over the years, where judges have actually come up with these terms. So the next one is the mailbox rule. Now what we're talking about is timing. Communication of the acceptance. So the idea is this. I make you an offer, so I email you. I will sell you my Corvette for $50,000, payable in cash, this coming Friday at noon at Bi-Mart parking lot in Monmouth, Oregon. and I give you all the specifics of the vehicle identification number and all that of the car. So it's clearly, truly an offer. There's no question about it. It's made in writing. It's my intent. Clearly an offer. And I say, you must communicate, or, actually I need to change that. We'll say Monday at noon at Weimar. Okay, not Friday, Monday. So after the weekend. So, I email that to you today, Tuesday, and I say this offer will be open and you must accept by Sunday at 5 p.m. Otherwise, the offer automatically terminates. It's null and void. All right? So it's Tuesday now. You must accept by Sunday. So I email that to you. In the meantime, so you get the email today, Tuesday. So you've got to respond by Sunday. So I now leave to go on Thanksgiving. I'm traveling, and I happen to be going to meet my family at a cabin in the woods where we don't have internet or cell phone service. So I'm going to be gone for the Thanksgiving holiday. So while I'm gone, let's say on Thursday, Thanksgiving, or Friday the next day, it doesn't really matter, you email me back. I accept your offer. I will meet you Monday at noon at Weimar. You accept all the terms and conditions exactly as I have presented them. There's no mirror image rule problem. You emailed it back to me at the same email address that I sent you the email to begin with, or it could be a fax or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But the same mode of communication within the time frame. But the problem is, I don't have internet. I don't have cell phone service. So I don't see your email. And over the Thanksgiving Day holiday, I run into somebody else that wants to buy my Corvette for $75,000. They have cash. They give me the cash. I sell them the Corvette on Friday or Saturday after you have already emailed me, but I'm just unaware of your email because I can't get email. So I come back on Sunday evening and I open my email box, and of course there's a million emails in there, and I see your email that you sent me on Thursday. So I email you back, hey, sorry, I didn't get your email, I was out of town, had no service. In the meantime, I already sold the Corvette, so sorry, too bad. So you sue me, because you had a buyer, you're going to buy it from me for 50, you're going to turn around and sell for 80 grand to somebody else. So now you're out $30,000 in profit. Guess what? When you sue me this time, you're going to win. And the reason why is the mailbox rule. The mailbox rule is a rule that basically says when the acceptance is put into, back in the day when we only had mail, put into the mailbox with proper postage, the acceptance occurs at that moment, even if I, the one who made the offer, don't know about it. Unless the offer says otherwise, the mailbox rule is the default rule, and that applies. So basically, again, this is the only Google image I can find, let there be acceptance. So when you put your acceptance in the mailbox, or an analogy would be when you hit send on your email back to me, even though I don't see it till Sunday, your acceptance is valid the moment you sent it to me. And obviously you can track that because you've got the metadata and everything. So that's the mailbox rule. Now this can lead to problems in the real world, as you can imagine. You make an offer and you don't know it's been accepted, and so you sell it to somebody else. I've actually had that happen, and this happens actually all the time in real estate. And so the way you protect yourself is in the offer itself, you make a statement, something to the effect of, your acceptance must be communicated back to me by email or fax on or before a certain date, and your acceptance will not be deemed to have been received by me until I have responded that I have received it, or something to that effect. So it's kind of like a double acceptance. And a lot of real estate contracts have that now, that the acceptance is not valid until the seller actually acknowledges receipt. In that way, you don't have this problem with the mailbox rule. I actually had that happen once on it was a multi-million-dollar property. It was property down the Oregon coast. that, this is back in the 90s, that the seller had made an offer to a buyer in Florida in writing. It was all legit. The buyer signed the offer the moment they got it, put it in the mail, certified mail so they could track it, and then Hurricane, I can't remember, I think it was Andrew, came in and shut down the mail for like a week. And that offer was sitting in the mailbox there, I think it was in Homestead, Florida, if I remember. So back in Oregon, in the meantime, no response, they sold the property to somebody else, and then they get the offer, the acceptance back in the mail with the date and everything on it. They're like, uh-oh, and they actually got sued. They ended up settling that, but it cost them a lot of money. So this does happen in the real world. And again, the way that you avoid that problem is in your offer, you say your acceptance is not valid until acknowledged, or something of that nature. All right. So the 3M rules of contract law on page 79. The meeting of the minds rule, the mirror image rule, and last but not least, the mailbox rule. Meeting of the minds, you must be thinking the same thing, have the same intent. Mirror image rule, the acceptance must be the exact duplicate of the offer itself. And then finally, we have the mailbox rule, which is the acceptance creates the contract upon sending. Not necessarily when I receive it as the offeror, but when you send it, you hit send under email, or you fax it, or you text it, or whatever the mode of communication is. When you hit send, you create the contract. So again, this is a possible fill-in-the-blank question. 85%, what are the 3M rules of contract law? And then I also want you to know basically what their meaning is for a multiple choice or true-false type of question. All right, so now let's go to page 77. Let's talk about termination of offers. Now here's what I mean by that. I've made you an offer. I will sell you my Corvette for $50,000. I send you the email. It's all clearly an offer. It's in writing and everything else. The offer's good till Sunday. So the question now is, what if I change my mind? Or I get another buyer that wants to pay me more money for the Corvette. Can I cancel my offer? Or how else might that offer be terminated that I've made to you? So there are multiple ways this can occur. So first of all, their own terms. So when I make an offer to you, this offer is good until Sunday, November 29th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you have not communicated your acceptance back to me by email on or before that time, the offer is automatically null and void. And again, it's always a good idea to put a time frame for an offer. Number one, just so it doesn't keep kind of hanging out there. And number two, creates a sense of urgency, of course. It's a sales technique which you're probably familiar with. But basically the idea is you don't want to have an open dangling offer out there. You want to have a time frame for some kind of response, either yes or no or whatever. Even if you don't put a drop dead time, at some point, just as a matter of due course, lapse of time, the offer will become stale and no longer valid just as a matter of reasonability. So for example, if I offer to sell you the Corvette for $50,000 and I don't really have a due date on there, and you call me up 5 years later, or you email me 5 years later, hey, I'll buy that Corvette for 50 grand. Well, that was 5 years ago. Well, you didn't say there was a drop dead date. I'm like, well, that's just a matter of reasonability. A couple of days here or there, that's one thing, but 5 years later, that's a whole other thing. So at some point, the offer just on its own becomes stale, or it withers on the vine, so to speak, just as a matter of time. Now the next two I have highlighted for a reason. They're probably the most important two on this page. And I want you to understand these two very important rules, because I see this in the real world all the time, in all sorts of transactions, everything from real estate to settling personal injury claims. So first of all, number 3 is the basic rule that if you have made an offer, so long as it has not been accepted, and so long as it's not an irrevocable offer, which we'll get to in a moment, if you have made an offer, you can cancel that offer at any time as long as it has not been accepted. You can revoke the offer. You can take the offer off the table, so to speak. Now to do that, you have to communicate it to the people to whom you've made the offer. So if I sent you an email about my Corvette, and you have not yet responded, I could email you and say, you know what, I changed my mind, I no longer want to sell it. And at that point, it's dead. My offer is gone. So if you turn around and say, you sue me, no, I revoked the offer before you accepted, and it was not otherwise an irrevocable offer, therefore no contract. So that's the basic rule. So long as you have not made an irrevocable offer, somebody has not accepted, you can change your mind and pull the offer. Now with that said, down below here, there are times when an offer has to remain open and you cannot revoke the offer. So the first area where this applies is what's called an option. An option is a side contract. So the easiest way to explain an option is basically it's an offer that you've paid me to hold open. You've paid me additional money above and beyond the purchase price to hold that offer open. So for example, if I email you and I say, I will sell you my Corvette for $50,000, come Monday, noon, Weimar, all the same thing. You email me back and you say, I need a little bit more time to think about it, got to move some funds around. I will pay you $500 today. I'll Venmo it to you, or I'll send it to you with crypto or whatever you want. I'll send you $500 if you will give me 30 days to make a decision. So I'll pay you $500 today if you will hold the offer to sell me the Corvette for $50,000 in cash open for 30 days. So I write back, agreed, you send me the money. So now you have paid me to keep that offer open. So you now have 30 days to accept the offer. It's your option. So you can decide to call me out. It's what we call a call option. That is, you can force me to sell for the $50,000. You've got to pay me that $50,000. Plus I get to keep the $500 on top of that. Or you may decide, you know what, I don't want to buy it, in which case I keep the $500. I keep the $500 either way. But you're not obligated to buy it. So options are very common. We see it in real estate, the stock market, oil, minerals, soybeans, orange juice futures, futures contracts, jet fuel, everything in the world just about. You see options. So the idea of an option is really simple, and that is you're paying somebody to keep an offer open, to require them to sell something to you, or the put is requiring somebody to buy something from you at a set price. Now what I want you to just focus on is you must be paid to hold the offer open. If you're not paid, or you don't receive some other consideration, it's not truly an option. And so therefore it's not irrevocable. Now there's another type of offer that is not revocable. And this is what's called the merchant firm offer rule, which is a fancy way of saying a rain check. You guys have probably heard the term rain check. So if you're a merchant, again, under the Uniform Commercial Code, a merchant is a professional seller of goods. So Bi-Mart, Safeway, Fred Meyer, Walmart, Costco, etc. So if a merchant gives a customer a written document, could be a little note. Agreeing to hold open a price, even if you don't pay the merchant, that is considered to be a firm offer by the merchant and therefore an irrevocable offer. So if I go down to BuyMart, well, let's see here if I've got an example. Well, actually we're going to go to High School Pharmacy this time. So they have a sandwich maker for $10.99, regularly $17.99. So I go to High School Pharmacy, they're out of them because there's a big, everybody wants to get a sandwich maker. So they give me a little piece of paper that says High School Pharmacy on it, tells me the product, tells me the price, and it's good for up to 90 days. Now I didn't pay them for that, but because they're a merchant and they gave me a written document, a rain check, they have to honor that price. Now, do I have to buy the sandwich maker? No, I'm not obligated. But if I do want to buy it within that 90-day time frame, or whatever time they put on the rain check, they have to sell it to me for that price. So it's a form of an irrevocable offer. Now that only applies to a merchant. Remember, a merchant is a professional seller of goods, and so that's not going to apply to a non-merchant. So if you're having a garage sale or something like that. All right. Back up here, number 4. So again, the 2 main rules of this page that I've highlighted. Number 1, revocation. Revocation means you can cancel your offer as long as it has not been accepted. Now, why must it be prior to acceptance? Why can't you cancel an offer after it's been accepted? It's not an offer anymore. It's now a contract, right? As soon as it's accepted, it's a contract. So that's why. All right, number 4, rejection. If you say no to my offer, that terminates my offer. So a rejection of an offer is a termination of the offer. It's no longer there anymore. So if I tell you, I'll sell you my Corvette for $50,000, and you say, oh, I'm not interested. You've just rejected my offer. That terminated my offer. And then you change your mind 10 minutes later, and you email me back, you know what, I changed my mind, I accept your offer. Well, at that point, I've already sold it to somebody else. And too bad, because when you rejected, you canceled that offer. Now this is important because if you're going to reject an offer, you need to be aware of this rule. This happens quite often in real estate, especially in a very hot market, where you may have multiple offers on the table if you're a seller. And so if you're a buyer, you've got to be very careful about rejecting and that kind of thing. Now here's a parallel point. If you make a counter offer to me, that is technically a rejection of my offer, which means my offer is now null and void. So if I offer to sell you my Corvette for $50,000, and you write me back and you say, well, I'll buy it for $40,000, you've now made a counter offer to me. So the legal effect of that would be, you've rejected my $50,000 offer, which killed it. So now, you've said $40,000, to which I can say yes or no. If I say no, and you say, okay, fine, I'll go back, I'll pay you $50, I don't have to sell it to you. Now, I could change my mind and sell it to you for $50, but I wouldn't have to. And that's what I see happen in the real world quite often, where I've made an offer and somebody makes a counter offer, which I don't accept, and then I sell it to somebody else and they come back and try to accept the original offer. Excuse me. All right. Death or mental incompetence. If I make an offer and I die, so long as it's not one of these irrevocable kind, then that offer dies with me. Or if you die. Again, unless it's one of these irrevocable kind. Or if I become mentally incompetent, then my guardian, whoever's taken over for me because I'm no longer competent, or it's sometimes called a conservator, can cancel the offer. That's pretty straightforward. Next, destruction of the subject matter. This is pretty straightforward. If I offer to sell you my Corvette, and a meteor falls out of the sky and blows up my Corvette, I didn't do it, right? It's just a force majeure, act of nature. Then that's automatically going to terminate the offer. So I don't have to turn around and come up with another Corvette to sell to you. And then finally, intervening illegality. If it becomes illegal to consummate the contract due to a change in law, that will also terminate an offer. So if I offer to sell my Corvette and then a law is passed making it illegal to sell vintage cars, that would terminate my offer. You don't see that happen very often, but that would probably be more in the area of a material or a substance that became illegal, something like that. If they made caffeine illegal or something. So my offer to sell you coffee would destroy the economy overnight, right? No caffeine, what are we going to do? All right. So for purposes of the midterm, I do occasionally ask what are different ways an offer can be terminated, to list those out. I always ask, however, either a true, false, or multiple choice question. I'll give you a little fact pattern. And to illustrate these two rules right here, revocation, that is, Bill makes Ted an offer to sell his car. Ted has not yet accepted and Bill changes his mind. He hasn't otherwise been paid to hold it open. That's a form of revocation. Or rejection and counteroffer. So just remember, the biggest one probably is the counteroffer rule in the real world. Just be aware, if you're going to make a counteroffer, it may not be accepted, in which case the original offer was killed by the counteroffer. All right, so that pretty much covers it for contract law between part one and then this is part two. So that's it for contract law.